So when Paul says in Galatians 4:4 that Jesus was born of a woman, born under the law, that means he was a real person. Now here's the mythicist argument against that. They will tell you that the word for born actually means manufactured. And they believed at the time that their Messiah was created in a cosmic sperm bank containing the semen of David in the firmament. I wish I was kidding.
Okay, so let's take these claims one at a time. Strong's Concordance suggests that the word that Paul used in Galatians 4:4 is most commonly used to denote the manufacture of an object. Genomai is identified as meaning to come into being, become, come about, happen, or born, in the sense that something is constructed. Could Paul have meant that Jesus was naturally born while using this word? Possibly. The only way that we can know for sure is to compare how Paul uses this word across his epistles, as well as how Paul talks about birth in other places. Romans 1:3 also talks about Jesus being born, but still uses the genomai. But how does this compare to Paul talking about other people being born? Does Paul use the exact same word? No, he doesn't. One caveat that I'll put here, due to my recent conversation with Neil from the Gnostic Informant, is that while both of these words do use the same root verb, which means to be born, the fact that both of these words are used for very specific purposes, I think strengthens my argument against Galatians 4:4 meaning a literal natural birth. If you go to Romans 9:11, it discusses the future births of children, and it uses the word genau, which again has the same root verb, but is changed in order to give it a different meaning. Strong's Concordance defines genau as meaning I begat of the male, of the female I bring forth, and to give birth to. This is an explicit reference to natural birth as opposed to the coming into being that genomai offers. Going back to the Galatians 4 passage, if you just progress a little bit in that section, you'll see in Galatians 4:23 that Paul is discussing how Abraham had two sons and one son was born, genau, to the slave woman. It seems weird to me for Paul to use distinctly different versions of the same verb just a few verses apart. It seems pretty clear to me that when Paul uses genomai for Jesus' birth and genau for other births, he is distinctly choosing those words because he does not consider Jesus to have had a natural birth. This idea is parsimonious with the context of Galatians 4, because the context of Galatians 4 is an allegory. Not only does Paul tell us that he is using these women as an allegory, but also, this allegory is used to communicate how Christ's death absolves us of our sins. The concept that Paul didn't consider Jesus to have a natural birth is also parsimonious with verses like Philippians 2:7, where Paul indicates that Jesus was made in the likeness of men. This concept also coincides with Paul's idea about Adam's body in 1 Corinthians 15:45, as well as our future resurrection bodies in 1 Corinthians 15:37. This non-natural birth concept is also parsimonious with other people writing at the same time as Paul. Hebrews 2:17 was not written by Paul, but a contemporary of his. And it also describes Jesus' body as being manufactured using the exact same words that Paul does. So the idea that Paul considers Jesus' body to be constructed or manufactured by God is parsimonious with the rest of Paul's theology, as well as the theology of his contemporaries. Now, on to the cosmic sperm bank. What cosmic means in this particular context is just heavenly. Not only Jewish theology, but also pagan theology had this concept of multiple levels to heaven that extend from the upper atmosphere all throughout the universe. And every single level of heaven seemed to house different types of divine beings. Paul himself in 2 Corinthians 12:2-4 has a man being taken up to the third heaven, where paradise, or Eden, is located. This notion is also located in the Revelation of Moses 37:4-5, 40:1-2, and 2 Enoch 8-9. So a cosmic or heavenly location seems to permeate Jewish theology. Now, the notion of a sperm bank is mentioned in Judaism, albeit not explicitly. When your days are fulfilled and you lie down with your fathers, I will raise up your offspring after you, who shall come from your body, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be to him a father, and he shall be to me a son. When he commits iniquity, I will discipline him with the rod of men, with the stripes of the sons of men. 2 Samuel 7:12-14. One thing that we can be sure about is that the Jews were deeply interested in reinterpreting their scriptures to be more messianic. Now, if this section was read like a pesher, it's very easy to see how some Jews would be convinced that God could scoop up the nut sauce of David and use it later in order to manufacture Jesus' body. If you think about it, this is parsimonious with other messianic prophecies that are supposedly in the Old Testament, but also what the New Testament says about Jesus, with him being a descendant of David or having Davidic flesh. This notion of God using David's nut juice to construct the body of Jesus is parsimonious with that. Even though that's not the original context of 2 Samuel, later Jewish legends actually envision demons scooping up David's nut sauce in order to create rival kings. So God collecting David's baby juice in order to create a body for Jesus later is something that early Jewish Christians would plausibly believe. And Carrier never states that this sperm bank is in the firmament. Carrier just places the sperm bank in heaven, and I sincerely doubt that God would store anything on the firmament, considering that at the time, Jewish beliefs indicated that demons inhabited the firmament, which was congruent with other religious beliefs at the time. So, everything that Captain Dadpool wishes he was kidding about is actually found in Jewish theology. Paul regularly identifies Jesus as having a body that was constructed by God, and even Jews thought that God and or demons could collect the nut juice from people while they were sleeping, including David. While this sounds ridiculous to us now, that was part of the Jewish theology at the time. Oh, and all this information is contained in Dr. Carrier's book that Captain Dadpool held up and said that he's read.
So what's more likely, that or that he was born under Jewish law by a woman?
I agree that being born of a woman, born under the law, is plausible. I don't know why Paul would need to say this in that section of Galatians. If he was wanting to say that Jesus was a Jew, he had already accomplished that by saying that Jesus was of the seed of Abraham and David in Galatians 3:16. But still, the minimal mythicist hypothesis does account for this being plausible. But what I feel is more parsimonious and therefore more plausible, given all the information that we've covered, is that Paul was not referencing a natural birth. And so many questions are created when you assume that he's meaning a natural birth. Why does Paul use a completely different word when he's referring to other births? Why does Paul seem to be only referencing Jesus as being constructed? Why does Paul refer to Jesus' body as being just like Adam's body in our future resurrection bodies? I mean, do you see how assuming a natural human birth here causes a lot of questions to arise for the rest of Paul's theology? I do agree that it's easier to just believe the passage at face value than it is to academically scrutinize the passage.